Let's get to some breaking news right now that we are tracking. Take a look at this live picture. We are still tracking this very large first responder presence. This is at Pier 58, and this is right along the Seattle waterfront. That is where construction work has been underway to remove Pier 58. You may recall in early August, the city determined that they did need to shut that down. It was deteriorating, and that they were going to do some emergency work. We have reached out to Seattle Police as well as Seattle Fire. We're going to bring you any updates as soon as we get that information, but you can certainly see multiple fire trucks here on the scene. And we also have our own news crew on the scene, including a couple extra photographers who are working to gather information for you. So keep it right here. We're going to break right back to the story as soon as we learn more. But again, we know this is focused on the area of Pier 58, which was currently under not construction, but they were actually deconstructing the pier. They were going to remove the decking there as well as the piling, and that work had just begun in earnest, and we know that they were attacking that from the waterfront on barges. What exactly has prompted this response, we don't know. We're going to keep an eye on this for you. Like I said, keep it right here. We'll get back to this as soon as we know more.
We know that area between the Seattle Aquarium and Great Wheel has been closed off for some time with that chain link fence around there, trying to keep people out of that area. So obviously that's a big concern. Don't know what the exact situation here is, but we do know that what appears to be from these live pictures that we've been looking at, that several dozen first responders, fire engines, that sort of thing, have all been on the scene there for at least probably a good half an hour or so. Again, we do have some crews on the way and on the ground there trying to gather some more information about exactly what happened. Obviously, this is creating a lot of interest as people that are around that area trying to visit some of the businesses along the waterfront there, trying to figure out what's going on as well.
The other thing I do want to remind our viewers, we have been reporting this over the last week, but the reason that they were doing the work here on Pier 58 is because engineers for the city noticed some recent movement in Pier 58 and a lot of deterioration, and determined it just wasn't safe. So they shut that down. As Steve mentioned, that has been fenced off, and there have been contractors working with the city to get in there and remove the decking as well as the piling. And we understand that that's a slow process, but what I can tell you is that this has been the scene for, I would say, the last 20 minutes. And again, we have crews on the scene, and we hope to have some information from the city here shortly. Let's get back to that breaking news we brought you just a minute ago. We have just received confirmation of what exactly is happening here. We are still tracking this very large first responders presence here at Pier 58 along the Seattle waterfront. What we do know right now, according to Seattle Fire, is that there has been a partial collapse of Pier 58. Several people have been rescued. We know 2 construction workers were transported to the hospital. Both of them are in stable condition at this hour. We are now being able to give you a ground picture right from the Seattle waterfront. Again, this is Pier 58, where we understand the pier has partially collapsed into the water. It was currently being demolished, taken apart, because it was considered an emergency situation, that it was not safe for the public. So it had been shut down to the public, and crews had been moved in by the city to deconstruct it. You can see to the right of the wheel, that's a barge that's there that was likely doing some of the demolition work, where they were removing the decking and the piling. We're trying to effort information on how these folks are doing, but we do know from Seattle Fire that Pier 58, we suspect that this was happening while they were deconstructing it just a short time ago. Part of it collapsed into Elliott Bay, and that this is a very massive response to a story that I suspect will continue to follow here for some time as this develops.
And we learned from Seattle Police, who posted a couple of tweets here within the last couple of minutes while we went to commercial break, that when that partial collapse happened, several people actually went into the water. And according to police, all of them have been rescued. As Michelle mentioned, there were 2 construction workers on scene there that have now been taken to Harborview Medical Center. Both of them are said to be in stable condition at this point. As you can imagine, because of the massive first responder presence there on the ground, no traffic is getting through along the waterfront there. And this appears to be the first picture that we're getting of that partial collapse there of Pier 58. Kind of see it in the northwest corner of your screen there, with a bunch of debris that appears to be in the water. We do expect that the area there is going to be closed down for several hours as these first first responders investigate, try to shore up, make sure everything is stable in that particular area. They are urging people to stay away at this point.
And I'm hearing that this is a photo courtesy of Seattle Fire. And again, this is of the water. This is of the partial collapse. This is Pier 58. Crews were in the process, we believe, of demolishing it when it collapsed. We know part of the job here was to remove the decking, and it looks as if the decking is partially submerged there. When that decking went, we understand a number of people did go in the water, as Steve mentioned. 2 of them, construction workers, actually transported to Harborview Medical Center. We have a crew at Harborview right now. We have multiple crews on the ground as well. But again, this is the first picture that we've seen of the actual collapse. Back out on the street, just if you're wondering exactly where this is, you probably know this is Alaskan Way. This is right between University Street and Pike Street. It is blocking both the north and southbound lanes, so you'll want to avoid this area. We have a massive police and fire response here. You can see that the caution tape is up. All of this is happening just to the right or the north of the Great Wheel that you're looking at there. Very happy to report that 2 of the construction workers that apparently were hurt are doing okay there at Harborview. And exactly what happened here, that's going to come in the days to come, we suspect. But right now, we're just happy to report that there are no fatalities that we're aware of. We know that 2 people have been injured that are construction workers, other people in the water, pulled from the water and doing okay at this hour. But again, Steve, this is Pier 58. This is also known as Waterfront Park to a lot of folks. And you will all recall, we've been talking about this really for the last couple of weeks because the city sent an engineer in there recently. And on August 6th, they said, hey, we're shutting this down. We don't want anybody on here. It's not safe. We need to remove it, and all of it needs to go.
And you see that fence that's up there, that chain link fence that has kind of a tarp covered over it. That's been in place for quite some time now, ever since they discovered this apparent visible gap several weeks ago that caused so much concern. The city was originally planning to start the sort of redevelopment or remove that pier in 2022. Because of that discovery that they found several weeks ago, they decided to speed that up. Closed off that area with that chain link fence there and that tarp over it, which is kind of blocking the view of this partial collapse that we've been reporting on for the last couple of minutes. But again, we did show you that picture that Seattle Fire had tweeted out just several minutes ago, showing exactly what had happened with this partial collapse there. So the city has long intended to remove that pier. Essentially what they were planning to do is build a new one, and it was going to have a playground, a public plaza in that same spot there. This was all part of the efforts going on along the Seattle waterfront to sort of revitalize or redo that area after the Alaskan Way viaduct came down some time ago. Again, they were planning to sort of do that work in 2022, so it was a ways off. But because of that visible gap that they found several weeks ago, officials decided to change that schedule. Seattle Parks and Rec, they went in there, they closed off that space just to make sure that no members of the public went on there, and that would lead to injury. But you can see this is happening right between the Seattle Aquarium and the Great Wheel, and that piece of construction equipment right in the middle of the screen there. That's the focal point of what we're talking about here with this partial collapse of Pier 58.
And guys, I'd like to go, thank you. You read my mind. I wanted to go right back to this photo because take a look at this. Seattle Fire tweeted this out a short time ago, and it really shows you what happened, or what is left is really probably the better way to say it. This is a partial collapse of Pier 58. So there on the upper left-hand corner of your screen, closer to the center or just off center, you'll see that appears to be the decking from the pier that just a piece of it just collapsed into the water. We know that this was being removed because they detected recent movement of the pier as well as deterioration, and they determined it just was not safe for the public, and they were going to remove the pier deck and the piles, and they were really concerned. We heard from the city's Office of Waterfront and Civic Projects that they were concerned about safety, so they made the effort to make sure that they were going to do the removal from the water side. So there's a barge there, and we believe that they were likely working on this today. We don't know what type of work they were doing or how much work had been done. But earlier in the week, we did report that work had begun and that it would probably take the bulk of the year. Again, let me just bring you up to speed if you're just joining us. There has been a partial collapse of Pier 58, one of two public piers in the city of Seattle, right down on the waterfront. This is a live look from the street. This collapsed just a short time ago. A number of people went into the water when it came down. Two of them are construction workers who definitely are injured. We don't know the extent of their injuries. We're told that they are expected to be okay. They are at Harborview right now. We have a crew at Harborview, and we have crews here on the ground monitoring the situation. We hope to talk to Seattle Fire, Seattle Police in pretty short order here. But this pier has been closed down since August 6th, and they were concerned and considered it emergency work to get this thing removed and broken down, and then eventually in 2021 replaced.
Yeah. And we should note that we do have several crews on the ground there. They are trying to get some more information, hopefully talk with some witnesses as well. We've heard within the last couple of weeks, we know that the business along the waterfront has really been impacted because of the COVID-19 pandemic, with just not a lot of traffic around there. With typically this time of year, you see a lot of pedestrians trying to go and visit those businesses and restaurants and such. We do know that business has picked up within the last couple of weeks. Kind of folks here from the Seattle area kind of revisiting those spots. So you can imagine that there were quite a few witnesses around at the time that might have just been walking around, maybe exploring some of those businesses, maybe having lunch as we're getting into this late hour. So we do have several crews on the ground there that are trying to gather some more information. Very limited information has come out at this point from Seattle Police and Seattle Fire. Michelle has been mentioning that in the last couple of minutes about how we're talking about this partial collapse that you can kind of barely see just above or just under the graphic that's on your screen there, that happened probably within the past 45 minutes or so is when this first came to our attention. I think you can see that shot just a little bit better there. That's kind of that waterfront park area just beyond the pier there. But we do know that several people went into the water. All of them have been rescued. Michelle was talking about those two construction workers that have been taken to Harborview Medical Center. Good news is they appear to be stable at this point. We don't know how many construction crews were in this particular area working on that removal at the time that this happened, but obviously a huge concern. And just sort of looking at that picture that we've been showing you from the other side of this that was sent out by Seattle Fire, it looks like a fairly big chunk, even though this is a partial collapse, a fairly big chunk of that pier that went into the water there.
Right. And Steve, when we first brought you the live pictures here, you could see just countless fire trucks along Alaskan Way, and it was very concerning. And of course, this is concerning. I don't want to minimize it in any way. But what gives me a little bit of hope here and makes me feel good is taking a look at the crews that are there. It appears that they've got this situation under control. And what we have heard from both police and fire is that two construction workers were hurt. We don't know if they were working on the pier at the time. We assume that perhaps they were. Of course, all of us have these indoor orders, so I don't know if they were there checking out the scene or if there was actual work happening there today. But we do know that multiple people right here went into the water and did have to be rescued. And we don't know the exact number at this point, but we do know two of them, according to Seattle Fire, were construction workers, apparently with this project, we assume, and they both are in stable condition. So that is some very good news indeed. And as we pull out here, our photographer on the ground just gives you a better look. This, of course, is from the south. That's the aquarium you see dead ahead of you. And then to the left is that pier that, is a barge. And that was the intent, was to ensure public safety, was to do all of the work, all the demolition work from this barge. And you see the crane that is there that was doing the removal, and they were going to, the plan was to remove all of the decking. Of course, that's all the wooden planks that you see that you walk on, so they're going to remove that, and then all the pilings. That's the portion, of course, that's holding up the pier. We don't know what caused that pier to collapse, but we know it was definitely on the city's radar, so much so that they closed it to the public on August 6th, and they initiated emergency repairs We know this project fully funded. We know Orion Marine Contractors out of Tacoma working with the city on this and have worked with them on other projects. We're efforting information from them as well. But again, they recommended this be removed in 90 days, and this work did begin in earnest. We know earlier this week we have been tracking it for you. But again, at this point, we're keeping an eye on this, and we hope to talk to some witnesses, as Steve mentioned. A number of businesses down here, but because of those indoor orders and people being encouraged to stay home, maybe fewer people down there than normal, and maybe perhaps that was a good thing.
Because of the weather, too, just because of all the smoke and fog that we've been seeing, particularly today, which seems to be a little bit thicker than it was yesterday. Michelle, I'll mention that I'm sort of looking at a video that was just posted to Twitter that we've been given permission to use, that I don't think we're able to put this on air yet, but just judging by what this witness has posted, it appears as if that portion of the pier that collapsed is very close to the Seattle Aquarium, just sort of judging by this upper level view, if you will, of that area that's collapsed. And here's a picture that Seattle Fire tweeted. So the picture that video that I'm looking at is a little bit higher up, and it appears as if it's pretty close to the Seattle Aquarium. I'd say probably just a few feet away. As we've been mentioning, this is Pier 58, right between the aquarium and then also the Great Wheel, which is a very popular spot for folks that are visiting the Seattle waterfront. Obviously, two major landmarks, two very popular landmarks for tourists this time of year. But we're talking about the sheer presence of first responders there, just trying to figure out what had happened. We had seen probably at least a dozen fire engines on the ground there, probably more than that, that were on the ground probably within the past 45 minutes or so, trying to figure out what had happened. Again, very limited information released at this point, but we do know there was at least a partial collapse. There's the large chunk of it there that was behind this cordoned off area that's been cordoned off for several weeks now, as this removal process was just beginning. Several people went into the water. All of them have been pulled out at this point, but we do know that 2 people have been taken to the hospital, stable condition, said to be construction workers. But you can still see the large number of first responders that are on the ground there, firefighters, medics, also police officers, trying to piece together exactly how this happened, whether it was actually during a removal process or what was actually taking place when it collapsed.
Right, and let's just underscore that at this point, we don't know if work was actually happening. We know that work began in earnest this week, and that there was a 90-day clock ticking on this to get the pier removed, because the city engineers went in there and they took a look at it, and what they saw concerned them. They noticed recent movement. That means that pier had shifted and moved. I don't know how much, but we also know that there was deterioration, and it just wasn't safe, and that this was, as Steve mentioned, a part of a bigger project to revitalize the waterfront. Pier 58 is just one of 2 public piers, very popular, just a great place to be, to look out over Elliott Bay. This is known as the Waterfront Park. Again, what you're looking at on your screen, just that building in front of you is the Seattle Aquarium, and just north of that is the Great Wheel, to let you know where we are. This is on Alaskan Way, right between University Street and Pike Street. Traffic is blocked both northbound and southbound, so you will want to stay away from this area. But what is encouraging here is if you look at this live picture, you don't see a lot of people scrambling and in a hurry. It looks to me, Steve, like they're really trying to just secure the scene,
right,
that the emergency response, perhaps that portion is over. Again, we know several people, as you see on your screen here, were rescued, and they actually fell in the water. Here is some viewer video just coming into...
And this is that video I was talking about a few minutes
Steve,
ago.
Why don't you talk about it, because you took another look at this. Walk us through this.
We were describing this just a couple of minutes ago, and as the video zooms in here, this is the one I was talking about just within the last couple of minutes. You see all the first responders there on Alaskan Way, and just to the left of that is that partial collapse that we're talking about that's very, very close to the Seattle Aquarium. Hard to judge from this vantage point, but I would say probably at least a couple of feet away from the Seattle Aquarium. Just want to update you on the traffic impact of all this as well. Obviously, this is an area that you want to avoid just because this investigation will likely span several hours as we head into the evening here on a Sunday. But Seattle DOT is saying that the left northbound and left southbound lanes are currently open on Alaskan Way. This is between University Street and Pike Street. They are obviously urging people to take caution, but if you absolutely have to take that route, that is one that you can take. But because of the investigation, because of the sheer response of all these firefighters and police that are on the scene there, obviously that is an area that you wanted to avoid. But again, from this viewer video that we got permission to use, you can really see how large that area is. We're kind of panning off to the left here to show the other side of Alaskan Way as some of those first responders arrive. This video was taken some time ago, obviously, but as we pan more to the right here, you can kind of see that area kind of towards the top of your screen there, right next to the Seattle Aquarium. That's that area that we're talking about with this partial collapse on Pier 58 that appears to have happened within the last hour or so. Zoomed in, and you can really see that spot.
All right, I just want to remind you, if you are just joining us, we are tracking breaking news here at Como News at 4 o'clock. We're going to continue following this into our 5 o'clock hour. This is a live picture of Alaskan Way. What you see, the building there in front of you, is the aquarium and the Great Wheel. You can't see. That is just to the south. But the story that we're following, what I'd like to get back to, is the photograph that Seattle Fire tweeted out earlier. We are dealing with a partial collapse of Pier 58. Pier 58 may sound familiar to you. It is one of only 2 public piers in our city, right on Elliott Bay, and it was being demolished because it was not safe. City engineers went in there recently, and on August 6th, they deemed it unsafe to the public and said, we've got to shut this down. In fact, we've got to remove it. And the reason was they detected movement of the pier as well as deterioration. So they were in the process, we know, starting this past week, of removing all of the decking, and then they were going to go in and remove the piling. All of it is done, and maybe we can get back to the barge shot. All of it was being done waterside, and that was for all of our safety. They felt the best approach to remove all of that was to do it from the water. So, of course, they were on a barge working with the crane and removing that decking. We don't know if they were in the process of doing any work today, though, Steve. What we do know is that several people went in the water. 2 of them are construction workers who were hurt, who were taken to Harborview Medical Center. They're there right now. We have a crew there as well. Also, crews on the scene. We're going to get to them in just a few minutes. Keep it right here. We're going to continue following this breaking news when we come right back.